All right. So right now, Israel is engaged in a war with Hamas to the south in Gaza, and then in Lebanon, they're fighting Hezbollah right now.
Hmm.
What are your feelings toward this situation as it is?
Oh, I'm gonna just be honest, keep it off the buck. I am pro Palestine. I don't think that it's. I feel like this is a lot of history that we're trying to like squish into one. I feel like a lot of people only focus on what's happening currently and not the issues that have happened like beforehand, like them cutting out food, et cetera, et cetera. Like I don't know. I feel like people should fight more for Palestine because one, they don't really have an army to fight back. So I think calling it a war is kind of like counterproductive because like, at the end of the day, it's a genocide. They can't really fight back for like what's going on with them. And at the end of the day, Israel, they have homes, they have places to stay, they have everything. While people in Palestine are quite literally eating like yeast or like making bread by themselves. Like it's just like it's a whole different, two different scenarios, two different power imbalances going on.
I definitely believe that you're able to have like a war without hurting the civilians. I think that the way that things have been going on have just like either been fully just towards civilians or just well, it's just the majority of the people that are being injured are just civilians, have nothing to do with this war, have nothing to do with any of this. And as she said, there is an entire history. There's 70 years of occupation, well, not occupation, 70 years of Israel's expanding and slowly taking the spaces that were originally in Palestine. I just feel like it's not fair to you can probably assume I'm pro-Palestine too. I don't think it's fair to have a discussion about like whether Israel should be doing this when Palestine hasn't even been able to have a political say on this during like the voting with the entire world. Palestine was never even able to give a vote.
Yeah.
So, and Israel was. So.
Yeah, we can go into that aspect of like the non-statehood with Palestine. So, as I'm sure you know, Palestine, the people of Palestine, they don't have a state. They're not officially recognized by the UN. Only about 140 out of the 190 UN members recognize them. They don't have passports, so they can't leave.
Yeah.
They're kind of stuck there, and they don't have a lot of the privileges that Israeli citizens do. So in this conflict, we've seen on October 7th, we saw about 1,200 to 1,500 Israelis killed, and then since then, once the war started, we've seen about 30 to 40,000 Palestinians killed, and then the number of militants within that number is debated. But still, there's a massive asymmetry to the numbers. It's an asymmetrical war, like you talked about. Where do we go from here in ending this conflict in a meaningful way?
Well, I think we can definitely start with a with a ceasefire. I
Yeah.
think clearly there's a clear. So I'm trying to find my words. It's very clear that at least like one or two sides or both sides don't want to have a conversation about this because this is primarily Israel against Hamas. It's not Israel, at least it has not been stated as against Palestinian civilians. So for sure, a ceasefire and then a way for conversation to happen about just getting the hostages out, getting civilians out of this war. Because for right now, like Palestinians are just forced to evacuate through Egypt, and there's like no space for them to leave other than like bribing Egypt to get out. So there's no structure to this. There's no way for civilians to get out of the conflict. So a ceasefire to have this, like, to have civilians stop being involved with it, and then just a conversation.
I see, yeah. Um, I guess my question to that would be, as I'm sure you know, this is not the first time these two entities have had a conflict. There's been ceasefires in the past. Do you think a ceasefire now would bring about a lasting end to this conflict?
No.
Or do you think there would have to be some other way?
Honestly, I think that Palestine should have their own sovereign like state. I don't think that they should be under Israel rule. because one, it wasn't even legal to begin with, and then they finally got legality. But still, also, I don't know. I just feel like they should have their own sovereignty because, like I said, it was their nation to begin with. And also, it's just like they have consistently tried to make peace with Israel, like the governors of Palestine or whatever, and it's just constantly been met with combatants. Like they have been like, oh, I don't want to listen. Like they took their water, they took their food at one time. It's just like there's no. I don't think Israel ever wants to have peace with them. I honestly think that they won't stop till they're completely off the map. And I feel like there should be like some type of like law or something put in place, and they should have their own sovereign state because them being under Israel rule, if they won't kill them with bombs, they'll probably kill them by taking off their food or access to water again. So it's just like they need to have their own power, like that they can empower themselves and build a better community.
For sure. There's 70 years of history since Israel became a state, and this has just been a growing conflict. They can have as many ceasefires as they could, but it's just really hard to find a permanent solution to this. Because obviously both states will want to stay sovereign states, and it's kind of hard to be there when there's so much space that's needed on both sides. There's entire populations that need to be in houses, that need to have food and all those things, and all in an area that used to be fully Palestine. But I don't know. It's a very difficult question.
Absolutely. One of the things that's why it's not solved right now.
But yeah.
One of the things that I'd like to bring up that a lot of younger Americans have been really concerned about is the influence of the Israeli government on American politics. Are y'all aware of AIPAC? Yes.
Sort of, yeah. I believe so. A little bit. I've heard of it.
Would you like to tell us what you know about AIPAC?
You said you knew it.
I know a little bit of it.
I know.
Could you
I've
refresh
heard
our
of it.
memory on that? Because I think I've heard of it, but I'm not too sure about that.
So AIPAC is the Israel lobby within the United States that's funded by the Israeli government.
Okay.
Right.
No, yeah.
They are the number one donor to Joe Biden and also Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. They across party lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of young people have found it interesting that the House and the Senate can't agree upon hardly anything for the American people, but yet we can send billions of dollars to Israel across party lines.
Yeah.
So what do you make of this?
I just see it's a lack of priorities. Like why, in my opinion, I feel like we should be funding that money that we're funding to Israel. They don't need it. They have plenty of money. I promise you, they have plenty of money. They do not need the money that like we need money for our own state because like we have current hurricanes going on that like people are losing their homes, and that our government could be funding that and helping them, but instead they're focusing on a war that these people don't even need like the money for. I don't think that they should be funding. I think it's a misuse of funds, honestly, because the United States is known for helping people who are suffering. No comment. I feel like they should at least like, if they are going to help somebody, they should at least be helping Palestine who actually needs the help, instead of just obviously this is because, like you said, Israel's our donors or whatever. That's why they're doing it. But it just shows, I don't know, it just shows our government's character and the fact that they would rather care more about money than their own American people.
I fully understand why people are feeling really unsure about things, especially when the majority of America's argument is like what side is right. So when it comes to both sides agreeing on this conflict continuing, I feel like I don't think anyone would want the U.S. to be involved in a war that does not involve us. Like, think of the proxy wars during the Cold War. Can't say that there's a lot of people that were really into that. So, yeah, that's all I'll say
We
about
could talk
that.
about that. So right now, it looks like as if, and you can disagree with me if you believe different, that the war is expanding.
Yeah.
Right? Iran's getting involved more, like 200 missiles shot because Israel's been assassinating major leaders in various countries.
Yeah.
They're obviously in Lebanon. Um, if Israel wants United States boots on the ground, like soldiers,
Hmm.
what do you think the United States response to that should be?
I don't think we should assist. I think they probably will assist, but I do think it'll lead with a lot of boycotts behind that. Sort of like when we had
Oh, for
the
sure.
Vietnam War and people were boycotting, like not wanting to send their families to war. I think that's probably going to be the same thing that's going to happen if that were to happen.
Well, there's a lot of wars going on right now, and there was a very clear decision. For example, in the Ukraine and Russia war, there's a specific choice that America made to not have their soldiers set foot into this war. So because of the clear like looming World War III from that, and I believe that this one will have the exact same results.
Yeah.
So I hope we don't
Gotcha,
become more
yeah.
involved.
No. I'll ask y'all one last question here. So, where do you get y'all's news from? And then, what role does social media play in the information that you consume?
I think a lot of people are definitely going to say that they heard about this from TikTok because, well, I wouldn't say that there's a lot of. I would say TikTok is really like lets more information out just in general. I'm not saying that political stuff, but you'll definitely see more content in TikTok than you see in other social media, and that's just because of like general like suppression thing. They're not going to let like kids see something bad on like it just in general. I'm not talking about like political stuff for the most part, but a lot of people would say that they heard it from TikTok first, but I definitely got the majority of my information from Palestinians that were making videos and were documenting things, as well as I will say I did get a lot of information from American media like the New York Times, Washington Post. Those are definitely left-leaning, but it's just I wanted to have a like clear like stance on this, so I definitely try to get as much information as possible, not just from social media, but I think social media was very important in the beginnings of a conversation about this. But I don't know, I think it's really important to hear as many sides as possible and have your own like stance on this, because I saw a lot of people that were getting that were honest, that I wouldn't say they were pro-Israel, but they were only hearing about what was happening with Hamas, not specifically the Palestinian civilians. Well, I was only hearing from Palestinian civilians, so we were having different opinions in the beginnings, like around after October 7th, so like around like November. But as this has grown, I feel like a lot of people have a more clear stance on where they want to be, but it definitely all started on TikTok, I will say that.
I would say I had around the same amount of research, like for you too, like same as you. Sorry,
It's okay.
y'all. I had a long night, but I would also say that I would like to take my teacher because I was in Rose Civ like around this time, and my teacher actually has like a degree in like, like Israel-Palestine, like those areas as well. So he kind of like really went in depth on the history of that, like what was going on, especially when it happened, like during that like time it was happening. He showed us news from opposing sides as well as like the pro-Palestine side. So I really got to get like a full scope of all the opinions as well as like the history to back it up. So I think that's kind of where I'm mostly for my opinion. And then like you said, I watched like direct sources from like Palestinians as well. And I think that like as for everybody else and getting their permission, I think that people probably should take a World Civ class. I highly recommend it. I don't know. I feel like people should probably go more in depth, especially when it comes to like this type of war where it takes like a lot of history. You have to know a lot of minor things or cultural things that are involved in the situation. So I think that people should probably take like a World Civ class when learning this or like talking about this. And also just like maybe we should encourage like more open discussions like this, like what we're having right now, because it is good to hear other people's opinions. I think that being stuck in a bubble of like your own opinion, although it's like good for like forming your opinion and forming your debate, you kind of have to hear the other side to be able to make a rebuttal to that, or at least like hear their point of view, because maybe you can find a solution that way. So I think that we should encourage more open-minded thinking and listening.
Absolutely. Actually, since you brought that up, I'd like to ask y'all one last question.
Okay.
If you could say something to a pro-Israel or just an Israel supporter, what would you say? If you could start that conversation, try to get them thinking about their position.
It's gonna take me a minute.
I need to think about like all
Yeah,
of
no
their
rush, no rush.
possible
Everything.
their way a conversation would start.
Well, for one, I want it to be known that you can live in a place and you can support your nation and still find issues within that and recognize those issues. It's kind of like standing. I hate them. Like it's kind of like standing like a celebrity. Like you can still like that celebrity and still call them out for their issues. I mean, even with Americans call out America's issues all the time, and we're still like, okay, we're American, but like you still have at the end of the day, when your country is wrong, your country is wrong. I feel like being able to take accountability for that is one thing, and then also just to recognize that nobody is hating on you. It's just your government, and if you take it personally, and as a lot of like, well, not I'm not saying a lot, but like the Israelis I see on TikTok who have been posted out for the world, like majority of them are mocking Palestinians. So when you post that type of stuff, it kind of makes people not want to like hear you out and stuff like that. Like I can hear your struggles and everything, but like you have to realize that like you can't make fun of somebody who's actually like genuinely suffering. I don't know. Go ahead.
Good statement, yeah.
I guess I would say that no one chooses where they're born. No one
Yeah.
like chooses like what side they're on, and it's not really a crazy thing to say that the Palestinians want to stay in their land. It doesn't matter how deep this conflict has been going on. They still want to stay where they were, and you can say the same with the people of Israel. They want to stay where they were born. They want to stay where their culture is. But that does not mean that that this conflict could continue. What needs to happen is that the hostages need to be finally freed, and there needs to stop the whole bombing civilians. I it's a little harder to like have a conversation on like what government is right, because I don't think either government is right. I don't The way that Hamas has been like, well, maybe I don't know that much about. Maybe I should take back my statement. But all I'm saying is that the government action should not cause the death of civilians, and it shouldn't cause any suffering from hostages or injuries on either sides. And but yeah, I just don't think that the way that it's still going, the approach that Israel is still taking, is really helping the conflict at all. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha, yeah. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it.
No problem.